Welcome back to the channel. This will be the update lineups video and podcast, and there are several changes from what I discussed several days ago because of injuries and fitness updates. All of that will be covered today, so if you find it useful or entertaining, then smash the like button and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. All your support is massively appreciated. On screen you can see Draft Town, who have their own version of the predicted lineups amongst many other tools like the player rankings, which is my personal favourite, and a bit of a spoiler alert, their Newcastle prediction is exactly what I've gone with in today's video. But of course, we sometimes get these curveballs and some surprises, and you can't really account for everything and get everything spot on, but this will give you a good idea of how each team will line up in Game Week 1, and later in the season there will be some changes of course. If you want to see all the preseason form and what could change from Game Week 1 and beyond, then check out the original predicted lineups video. Today I'll focus more on Game Week 1 as well as the injuries and fitness updates, which are very crucial. But let's jump straight into it, starting with Arsenal. This is one of the few teams where I haven't made any changes whatsoever from the last edition, and all the prices you see on screen are going to be FPL prices, just in case people were a bit confused about that. Sometimes non-FPL viewers will be thinking, why is Saka 10 million? That's surely not his transfer market value, and indeed, that is correct. It's an FPL price. But David Raya is in goal, and I'd argue is the best way of covering that Arsenal defence. Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel and Zinchenko will likely be the back four. The only doubt would be Zinchenko, but I think he'll start at left back for Game Week 1 and possibly Game Week 2. I think Calafiori will be eased in as he only got a handful of minutes against Lyon in Arsenal's 2-0 victory in the last pre-season game. Partey, Odegaard and Rice is also a strong midfield three, but we could see Jorginho instead of Thomas Partey. And up front, Saka, Havertz and Trossard. And that's another slight doubt, Trossard or Martinelli, and I would give the edge to the Belgian, who has featured more in pre-season. And another possibility, which I discussed the other day as well, is Kai Havertz playing as a left centre mid with Declan Rice as the defensive midfielder, and then we'll see Gabriel Jesus up front. So that's another possibility, but this for me is the most likely starting 11. And as for injury updates related to Arsenal, Kieran Tierney and Tomiyasu are both ruled out, and Fabio Vieira is a slight doubt for this game. He wouldn't start regardless, he'd only be on the substitutes bench at best. And another problem we've seen recently is Jurriën Timber, who suffered a load injury, and that could be a consequence of the ACL injury he had last season, which saw him miss the entire campaign pretty much. But Jurriën Timber should be back in contention. I think he'll be on the bench, and Zinchenko will be the starting left back in Game Week 1. Aston Villa also have two players ruled out in Tyrone Mings and Kamara, both of whom were nailed on before their long-term injuries. They're still in rehab. We likely won't see them before the international break, but Emi Martinez will be in goal with a back four of Cash, Konsa, Pau Torres and Luka Dean. Once Mings is back and can start consistently, I'd expect them to partner Pau Torres with Konsa shifting to right back. So Matty Cash might be nailed on for Game Week 1, but I don't think he will be in the long term. The midfield should be Bailey, Onana, Tielemans and Ramsey, and the front two could be McGinn and Rodgers. Technically McGinn would be an attacking midfielder or second striker, and once Watkins is ready to start, he will undoubtedly play up front with Rodgers just behind him, and we'll probably see McGinn on the left hand side and Jacob Ramsey dropping to the bench. There is still a chance that Watkins will start against West Ham, but I haven't really heard anything in terms of him training, and he has returned late from the Euro duties he had, so I'm not entirely sure he will start against West Ham. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I think it's almost 50-50. Speaking of which, Olsen's the only doubt. He's got a 50% chance of playing, and either way, he is the backup to Emi Martinez this season. Aston Villa have good opening fixtures, and despite their poor pre-season, I still think they can have a strong campaign this year. Bournemouth have three players ruled out in Adams, Brooks and Ernal, and I have one slight concern in terms of who starts up front. It could be Semenyo on the right hand side and Jefferson, a 4.5 million forward, starting for the Cherries up top, but I think it'll be Neto in goal with a back four of Smith, Zabani, Senesi and Kirkes, a midfield pivot of Christie and Scott, Tavernier and Sinistera as the wingers, with Kluivert just behind Semenyo, and we could even see Kluivert on penalties. He took the last one in pre-season, but it might go to a different penalty taker instead. Nottingham Forest away looks very promising in Game Week 1. Afterwards, the fixtures aren't great. They have lost Dominic Solanke. That could be a massive loss, but I still think Bournemouth have some good attackers. There's also Billing on the bench who could get some game time, and Jefferson, who might start a lot of games as a 4.5 million forward. Brentford have made a very impressive signing in Fabio Carvalho from Liverpool, and I'd expect him to break into the starting 11 very soon, but not in Game Week 1. I think this is fairly locked in, and a bit like Bournemouth, the only doubt would be who starts up top in the first game week of the season. Flecken will be in goal, with Roslev, Collins, Pinnock and Adja as the back four. Norgard, Jensen and Janelt is a solid, dependable midfield three for Brentford. Mbeumo and Schade could be the wingers with Wissa up top, but if Ivan Toney gets the nod, we'll see Wissa shift to the left and Schade dropping to the bench, and that's the only concern I have with the starting 11. But if any Brentford fans are watching, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. The same goes for every other club covered today. The opening four fixtures don't look that great, but I still think Brentford can produce some very big returns against Crystal Palace and Southampton. In terms of injuries, there are a few problems for Brentford, like Joshua Da Silva, Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey, who will likely not feature in Game Week 1. They might not even make the bench. As for Igor Julio, he will be out until late 2024, so that is another big blow for the Bees, but they've still got a very strong 11 for Game Week 1. We're now on to Brighton, who have Jason Steele in goal for the first few game weeks of the season, as Verbruggen is ruled out. A back three of Veltman, Dunk, Van Heck, and this could sometimes be a 4-2-3-1 by the way, with Veltman on the right hand side, Dunk and Van Heck as the two centre backs, and Barco on the left hand side. Minter would be the right wing back in this sort of system, with Weifer and Milner as the two centre mids, but we could see Baleba take some minutes off James Milner throughout the course of the season, and two wingers in Matoma and Joao Pedro. But if they play a 4-2-3-1, it'd be Matoma on the left hand side, Joao Pedro as the attacking midfielder, and then we'll see Minter on the right hand side. But Danny Welbeck will start up front. He's in great form in pre-season. The opening fixtures might not look great for Brighton, but I have to say from Game Week 4 onwards, Ipswich Town looks very promising, and afterwards the fixtures do get better for the Seagulls. And in terms of injuries, they've got quite a few problems. March and Verbruggen are ruled out. Then you've also got Enciso, who suffered a knee injury during the Olympics, and he played in the Copa America as well, so he definitely won't feature in Game Week 1. As for Ferguson, Estupinian, Lamptey and Gilmore, they're not completely ruled out, but I just don't see them starting in Game Week 1 and possibly in the preceding game weeks as well. As I stated in the original predicted lineups video and podcast, it's very difficult to get Chelsea spot on, but I believe Robert Sanchez will start in goal with Gusto, Tosin, Badiashile and Cucurella as the back four, but the centre halves poses a lot of issues with Colwill and Fofana also knocking on the door. I think it'll be a midfield pivot of Enzo Fernandez and Lavia should Chelsea go for this 4-2-3-1 formation, Madueke and Sterling as the two wingers, and Palmer just behind Nkuku. But we could see Chelsea shift to a midfield three with one of Caicedo or Dewsbury Hall starting, and then you'll see one of Madueke or maybe even Cole Palmer drop to the bench. And you might be thinking, why would Palmer be on the bench? Because he hasn't featured much in pre-season. He came on as a sub against Inter Milan in a 1-1 draw. But I personally believe Palmer is going to start in Game Week 1, unlike a Phil Foden, for example. And my major doubts with this lineup would even be up front. Jackson could start there, but he did suffer an injury very recently in pre-season. So Nkuku up front with this attacking three behind him looks very likely. But let's wait and see which formation Chelsea end up playing. As for the injuries, they have a few problems. Reece James is one of them, unfortunately, and he was suspended for the first few game weeks of the season regardless. As for Petrovic and Kellyman, they are ruled out for Game Week 1. Crystal Palace have a fairly settled starting 11 for the most part. Henderson will be in goal with a back three of Richards, Anderson and Mark Gay. The two wing backs are very nailed on in Munoz and Mitchell, with two central midfielders of Wharton and Hughes, and a front three of Kamada, Eze and Edouard for the time being, as Mateta was at the Olympics with France and he'll return very late on. Probably in Game Weeks 2 or 3 he'll start having a chance of getting good minutes, but in terms of starts that might take a bit of a while for Jean-Philippe Mateta. And as for other doubts in this starting 11, Chris Richards did have a knock, so I still expect him to start in Game Week 1, but it's worth mentioning that, and we could see Chadi Riyad start instead of Mark Gay or even Chris Richards, depending on the injury situation and fitness of those two players. But apart from that, I'm very confident about this team, as the other two doubts relate to Cheick Doucouré, who will probably not start in Game Week 1 or 2, but once he's fully fit and available, we could see him start over Hughes in the future. And then we've got Mateus Franca de Oliveira, who is completely ruled out for Game Week 1 and beyond. Everton have several injury concerns, which is why this starting 11 might not feel completely right. It's not going to be their strongest 11 later on in the season, and they did sign Ndiaye, the former Sheffield United attacker, and we could see him start just behind Calvert-Lewin, with Doucouré being shifted to the midfield. And in that position, you've also got Garner, but he's currently an injury concern, and that's why I've gone for that midfield pivot of Idrissa Gana Gueye and Tim. I'll call him Tim just in case. I don't want to butcher his name completely. But Pickford will start in goal, with Ashley Young at right back if Seamus Coleman isn't fully fit and available. He's another injury concern for the Toffees. A back two, or a centre-half pairing of Tarkowski and O'Brien, with Mikolenko on the left-hand side, Harrison, Gay, Tim and McNeil as the midfield four, with Doucouré as the floating striker and also attacking midfielder, so to speak, just behind Calvert-Lewin, but that could change over the course of the season, and Everton are top of the fixture difficulty rating for the first 14 game weeks of the season, which also stems until December. So it's a great fixture run for Everton, but the injury concerns relate to Dele Alli, Patterson and also Chimiti. They're all ruled out completely. Branthwaite is very unlikely to feature in Game Week 1 and 2. The same goes for Garner and Seamus Coleman. And the other concern is Michael Keane, who's at 50% chance of playing, according to several websites like Premier Injuries. So those are all the injury concerns for Everton. I believe this will be the starting 11, but over the course of the season, we could see Garner instead of Tim, or Doucouré being shifted into that position, and Ndiaye as the second striker behind Calvert-Lewin. Fulham have no injury concerns whatsoever, the complete opposite of Everton, and their starting 11 also hasn't changed from the last edition. Leno will be in goal with a back four of Castagna, Diop, Bassi and Robinson, a midfield pivot of Lukic and Andres Pereira, with Adama Traore and Iwobi on both flanks, and Smith Rowe, the new signing, just behind Rodrigo Muniz. And there are some excellent fixtures for Fulham in the opening part of this season, so it all looks good for Fulham. Nothing new to report in this department for now, but keep an eye out for the press conferences today and tomorrow. Ipswich Town are also fairly difficult to predict because they might play a back three in the opening two game weeks of the season against Liverpool and Manchester City, and if that's the case, we could see someone like Twanzebe or Burgess as one of the centre-backs alongside Wolfenden and Greaves. But if they play this 4-2-3-1, I believe it will be Muric in goal, with Johnson, Wolfenden, Greaves and Davis, with Morsi and Luongo as the two holding midfielders. But it could also be Taylor, for example, who has been playing very well in pre-season. The attacking four will likely be Hutchinson, Chaplin, Harness and Delap up front. But once again, there are some key doubts, mainly at centre-back. I think Greaves will start now, but then you've also got Burgess, who could play there, and Twanzebe. And if Ipswich Town go to a back three, we might even see a shocking bench player. For example, Chaplin, who started virtually every single game in the Championship last season. He was one of the top scorers and assisters combined. That might be a big loss if they drop him to the bench to facilitate this more defensive formation against two of the best teams in the country. Now, Ipswich Town have 5 injury concerns, and 4 of them are completely ruled out in Harry Clark, George Hurst, Nathan Broadhead and Janoy. And as for Cameron Humphreys, he's at 25% chance of playing, but my major concern with the starting 11 is related to Chaplin, and if Ipswich Town decide to go for a third centre-back. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I've made several changes to the Leicester City predicted lineup, as there are some key injuries, including Jamie Vardy, who will miss Game Week 1, and that is a major blow for the Foxes. Hermansen will be in goal, and I've made a few changes in the backline as well, with Justin, Vestergaard, Fass and Christensen. It's worth mentioning that both fullbacks can play on either flank, so it could be Christensen at right back and then Justin on the left hand side. The midfield three should be Winks, Chowdhury and Ndidi, and a front three of Fatawu, De Cordova-Reid and Mavidivi up front, and he will take several set pieces, especially in the absence of Jamie Vardy, so that could also be a 5-point family midfielder worth looking at. The opening fixtures aren't great, and apart from Vardy, Leicester have Connor Cody, who's completely ruled out, and Daka is very unlikely to feature in the opening game week of the season. Liverpool might be the most interesting team from an FPL perspective to kickstart this season. Alisson will be in goal, of course, at 5.5 million. A back four of Trent, Quansah, Van Dijk and Tsimikas. I've gone for the Greek left back over Robertson because he has featured in most preseason games, and Robertson suffered an injury at the Euros and now he has just returned. He featured in a 0-0 draw against Las Palmas in Liverpool's B team, which might also give you a good indicator as to who will start against Ipswich Town away. I've gone for Gravenberch as the holding midfielder with Szoboszlai and McAllister just ahead of him, but Harvey Elliott has a great chance of starting, especially with the slight doubt over Szoboszlai's fitness. He's at 50% chance of playing at the moment. He's currently being assessed with a small injury problem, so let's wait and see how that ends up going. But that's the biggest doubt with this 11. It'd be Szoboszlai or Harvey Elliott and possibly Tsimikas or Robertson at left back. The front three will be Salah, Diaz and Jota for the time being. Over the course of the season, we'll see Darwin Núñez and Gakpo start from time to time. Now, in terms of injury problems, Szoboszlai is a slight concern, and the only ruled out player is Bobby Clark, but he wouldn't start regardless. So this starting 11 is fairly locked in. Just left back and possibly one of the midfielders is up for debate, but Quansah should be the main centre-back partner for Virgil van Dijk. On Wednesday, the 14th of August, we got some major breaking news about Manchester City. Oscar Bob is injured for several months, possibly until December, which is a massive shame. Hopefully, he recovers very soon, but he suffered a broken leg, I believe. So now it's just a question of who will start in those winger positions. Phil Foden still hasn't returned just yet, and he might make the bench against Chelsea, but it's very difficult to see him starting from the get-go. But Pep Guardiola has talked about his fitness being incredible and his recovery times are sensational. But Ederson will be in goal with Rico Lewis, Ruben Dias, Akanji and Gvardiol as the settled back four for now. Kovacic, De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva is a likely midfield three, but we could see a player like McAtee instead of Kevin De Bruyne in Game Week 1. And I think it'll be Doku on the right-hand side and Savio, the new signing for Manchester City, playing on the left, and that would be the replacement for Oscar Bob. Doku is primarily a left winger, but he can play on the right-hand side, and if Savio starts, I think that's the more likely scenario. Erling Haaland will of course start up front. But it's a shame that Oscar Bob is injured. He was going to start week in, week out for at least the first few game weeks of this season, and now he's going to have a lengthy spell on the sidelines. The other injury concerns relate to Jack Grealish, who isn't officially ruled out, but he missed the Community Shield final due to a slight problem, and Rodri had that injury in the Euros final against England. He was subbed off at half-time, and he's currently being assessed for that clash with Chelsea. Manchester United have been decimated by injuries before the season has even begun. Onana will be the starting goalkeeper, there's no doubts about that whatsoever. And the back four will likely be Dalot, Maguire, Evans and Martinez, but they have signed De Ligt and Mazraoui. We could even see them start in Game Week 1, but I don't think that'll be the case. And instead, their debuts could be made against Brighton away. And with those players signed, I think we'll see De Ligt partnering Lisandro Martinez as the two centre-backs, and we could see Mazraoui on the right and Dalot on the left, but both of them can play on either flank, but I think that's also going to be the most likely scenario for Manchester United. The two holding midfielders will definitely be Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo, and a front four of Diallo, Fernandes, Garnacho and Rashford is definitely on the cards, and Xerxes hasn't featured whatsoever in pre-season, otherwise I would have had him up top in the absence of Rasmus Højlund, who's out for several weeks. And speaking of which, there are many players ruled out for Man United, including Euro, who is out for 3 months, Malacia, Fish, Luke Shaw and Højlund, and a few other doubts relate to Harry Maguire and Lindelof, so there's no guarantee that Maguire will even start in Game Week 1, but I think Johnny Evans definitely will against Fulham, considering all the problems United have at the back. Newcastle also have many injury problems, and over the last year, both Newcastle and Man United have had so many injuries, and they've been fairly unfortunate in that department. But Nick Pope has just returned from a lengthy spell on the sidelines, and he'll be the starting goalkeeper this season. Trippier and Lewis Hall are my predictions for the fullback positions, but Livramento can play on either flank, and Schär and Byrne is the likely centre-back partnership until Sven Botman returns from his lengthy spell on the sidelines. The midfield three should be Bruno Guimaraes, Longstaff and Joelinton, who is a massive player for Newcastle. Jacob Murphy has been on fire in pre-season, so definitely keep an eye out for him as a budget enabler, Anthony Gordon on the left, and Isak up top. The opening 4 fixtures look great for Newcastle, not so much beyond that, especially in Game Week 6 against Manchester City. But in terms of their injuries for Newcastle, Botman, Lascelles, Lewis Miley, Target, and Tonali are all ruled out. The same goes for Callum Wilson. As for Fabian Schär, he has a slight concern with an ankle/foot injury going into Game Week 1, but I'm still very confident he will start against Southampton at home. Unlike Newcastle, Nottingham Forest have no injuries whatsoever, and they've got a fully fit squad going into that opener against Bournemouth at home. Sells will be the starting goalkeeper with a back four of Williams, Milenkovic, Murillo and Aina, and a holding midfield partnership of Sangare and Danilo, and the front four seems nailed on with Elanga and Hudson-Odoi on both flanks, and then Gibbs-White just behind Chris Wood, who is one of the best budget forwards for the opening 3 game weeks of the season. So no changes from the last edition when I covered Nottingham Forest and their starting 11, but of course there's always a few curveballs thrown your way, and I still believe Nottingham Forest can get off to a flying start in the opening 3 game weeks. Southampton boasts plenty of budget players in every single position. I wouldn't recommend McCarthy at 4.5 million, despite the fact he will start every single game for the rest of the calendar year, as Bazanu is injured for several months. Harwood, Bellis, Stevens and Bednarek will be the back three, and they all cost 4 million. The 2 wing backs will likely be Sugawara and Walker-Peters, but we could see Charlie Taylor, another 4 million defender, start plenty of games at left wing back. In the last friendly though, it was Kyle Walker-Peters in that position, and he's done it plenty of times for Tottenham and Southampton. The 3 midfielders will be Smallbone, Downs and Aribo, and the front 2 is undisputed with Adam Armstrong and Brereton Diaz, who is probably the standout pick, especially in terms of attackers for Southampton. There are only 2 injury concerns for the Saints. Sulemana is at 25% chance of playing. I don't think he'll play in Game Week 1 or 2, and Bazanu is injured for the rest of the year. Ange Postecoglou has confirmed that everyone is fully fit in his recent press conference, but there's one player who won't be available, and that's Bissouma. He has been suspended by the club for taking laughing gas, so the midfield pivot will likely be Bentancur and Sarr. That's the key change I've made from the last predicted lineups video on podcast, but I've also brought in Udogie at left back over Jed Spence and Solanke up top, who is 100% ready to play. I think this will be the starting 11 for Tottenham Hotspur, with Vicario in goal, the 2 fullbacks being Borro and Udogie as usual, Romero and Van der Ven, which is a very solid centre-back partnership on paper, Bentancur partnering Sarr, and then an attacking 4 of Kulusevski on the right, Maddison down the middle, Heung-min-Son on the left, and Solanke up top. And in terms of the other injury concerns, Forster and Richarlison are the furthest behind in terms of fitness because they haven't really featured much in pre-season. But apart from that, it all looks good for Tottenham Hotspur. I've made several changes to the West Ham predicted lineup. Areola remains in goal with a back 4 of Soufal, Kilman, Mavropanos and Emerson. So I've gone for the Greek centre-back over Kurt Zouma, who is constantly linked with a move away from West Ham. I've gone for a midfield 3 of Guido Rodriguez, the new signing, Soucek and Lucas Paqueta, but the major doubt is whether it will be Soucek or Ward-Prowse in that midfield slot. And the front 3 is Jeroboam, Kudus and Mikel Antonio up front. I think that'll be the case in Game Week 1, and then Fulkrug will become the starting striker for West Ham week in and week out. There's only one player ruled out, and that's going to be Edson Alvarez, who won't feature in Game Week 1 and possibly for the next few weeks. But once he's available, West Ham have a lot of midfielders to choose from, as Ward-Prowse, Soucek, Guido Rodriguez, Lucas Paqueta and Edson Alvarez himself will all be competing for those midfield slots. The 20th and final team is Wolves, and I've made a lot of changes, including the formation, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Gary O'Neill plays multiple formations depending on the opposition. It can be a 4-2-3-1, maybe a back 3, and then going for 5 midfielders, but it all depends on who's available and how they want to set up against the opposition. Jose Sarr will be in goal at 4.5 million. He's a very underrated option between the sticks. Doughty and Aït-Nouri will be the fullbacks, and Mosquera and Totti will be the likely centre-back partnership if Wolves play a back 4, but there's also Craig Dawson, and he would play if Wolves revert to a back 3. And I've gone for João Gomez and Lamina as the 2 holding midfielders, and Lamina has been passed as fully fit and available. And I've gone for a front 4 of Sarabia, Gomez, Hwang Hee-chan and also Larson. And it's worth mentioning that Rodrigo Gomez has been on fire in pre-season, scoring multiple goals, and he has a great chance of starting, possibly as a wing back, but he can also play as a winger. That's his main position on the left-hand side. In one of the recent friendlies, I believe he played as a right wing back, so he's very versatile, and despite wherever he's been playing, he's been getting the job done in terms of goal scoring. Arsenal away is a very tough test, and Wolves have so many injury problems. Larson actually has a slight problem, but I still believe he'll be fully fit and available for Game Week 1. Lamina is obviously fully fit. Matheus Cunha is ruled out, and the same goes for Enzo Gonzalez, also Chiwoni, and Nelson Semedo. And as for Podence, he's at 25% chance of playing at the moment, but that could change as we approach the Game Week 1 deadline. As I've done in several videos recently, I want to recommend another differential who's been doing very well in pre-season, and that's Minter from Brighton and Hove Albion. He's priced at 5.5 million with such low ownership at around 1%. He got 10 goals and 5 assists last season in just 17 starts, and he created 9 big chances, and in pre-season he's been scoring and assisting multiple goals despite playing as a wing back at times, and he can also play as a winger, similar to Rodrigo Gomez, who I just covered. The opening fixtures aren't great, and João Pedro would be the go-to budget Brighton attacker, but I still think Minter can rival him if he can stay fit and start every single week for Brighton. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. It was another extensive one covering every single Premier League team with all the latest injury updates and team news. And of course, it's not going to be 100% spot on. It's so difficult to get one team right, let alone all 20. But it will give you a good idea of how these teams will line up in the opening game week of the season. And I have discussed throughout both the original predicted lineups and the updated version how things can change over the course of the season. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new if you enjoyed the content. Let's try to get this to over 300 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Draft Town, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to supporting my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 1 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.